Hello and welcome. This week we are doing a solo episode. So I just thought it would be fun to dive into these systems that I use. I use them in my practice, I use them in the podcast. I'm always introducing you guys to the guest by their human design, by their astrology. And so I just thought it would be really nice to talk about why I love these systems so much and why they're useful. Why is a big thing for me in my life. I'm very practical and I'm very grounded, even though I'm very spiritual and I love all of these kind of esoteric tools, but they have to be grounded and logical for me, and they have to be useful. So I thought it would be kind of fun to talk about why I think they're so useful and helpful, and a little bit more about what they are. So my favorite three tools are human design, astrology, and gene keys. And I use these in kind of my own unique way. When I'm doing a reading, I kind of interlay all of them together. I think it helps to add layers, instead of just playing checkers and then you could play chess or you could play 3D chess. That's kind of how I think about looking at all of the different layers and really how to kind of meld these for you to have the best understanding of yourself, your purpose, why you're here, what are your gifts, what's kind of a struggle for you. And when we can bring awareness to all of these things, we just have a different experience. I always think about how the journey is the same, right? Like I'm setting off on this journey and you find yourself in different situations, but mindset is key. I remember I on a whim, it felt like a whim, but now looking at my astrology, it's like, okay, yes, I signed up for this and it just happened, but it felt like a whim. I signed up for the Navy and joined the Navy within like weeks of, I had lost my job at Wells Fargo, which I hated. And I was just sitting there for like months trying to figure out a way out of this job. And some weird technicality, I lost my job, and it wasn't even anything that should have lost me my job. So I was thinking about not wanting to go back to a desk, and I didn't want to continue down the same path that I felt like was just going and punching a time clock. I just didn't want that anymore. And so I randomly was looking for a new job, and I saw a ad for like cook for the president. And at that time I was like obsessed with cooking. I watched the Food Network all the time and would cook for hours. And so I thought, ooh, this would pay for me to learn to be a chef, right? And so I went to the office, and it was like the global force for good was the Navy. And I was really into, doing our part. And so I was like, oh, yeah, this is the global force for good. This is going to be great. Maybe I think there was some sort of natural disaster that had happened around that time, and the Navy had helped out with that. So I was like, ooh, I could help out with, natural disasters and different things. And so the guy kind of talked me into signing up right there on the spot. And I was like, sure. And so I signed on the dotted line. I was dating my now husband, and I was just like, hey, I joined the Navy. So I guess we'll figure it out. And we did. But yeah, it seemingly was out of nowhere. Now I see, the planet of Uranus was kind of squaring the nodes, which are really always keeping you on track. And it was like, you're not on track. Boom, here's your what you need to be doing. And that led to me actually being a weather forecaster and traveling and getting to meet all of these amazing people, and travel to Korea, live in Hawaii, which were experiences that really grew me as a person, meeting all these different people and living far away from home. And also, I was a weather forecaster, which I never had any interest in. And I still, until recently, was like, what was that for? Because I always believe every job is setting you up for your next thing, that they're always important. And I couldn't really figure out weather, but it was an intense training. I had to literally learn 4 years of college in like 8 months. And and then you sat and you watched like charts, right? Like weather charts, and watching the weather patterns and how it affects. And literally astrology is so much in the same realm. I'm staring at charts and data and I have to bring it to life. So it's just so interesting how life is always for you and the journey is always for you. But it's like the mindset, right? So when I went off to boot camp, I was like, this is awful. This is terrible. Like I had a panic attack the first day. I almost left the first day and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going home and saying I got discharged for, having a panic attack. So I muscled through it and I ended up, making it to the other side. But it was like that awareness that this is 2 months of my life. This is only 2 months of my life, this boot camp thing, and it's going to bring me down this path that I want to explore. And so having that mindset, that's what I feel like astrology brings me all the time. It brings me this mindset of this is only this much time, right? Right now I'm going through kind of an intense transit. I mean, everybody in their 40s have kind of this Neptune square. So I've got that, but I have Neptune opposite my sun. So it's also squaring my sun. So that's kind of an intense transit and it's on that nodal axis. So let's just bring more to it. And then where Saturn is in my chart is a really uncomfortable place. So yeah, there's a lot of discomfort, but learning all of these things and working with mindset for as long as I have, it's like bringing that awareness that this is only 2 years, right? And after these 2 years, you're going to go, wow, I would never change that, right? Like I would never wish that I didn't go to boot camp because it brought me all of the beautiful friendships and the journey that I had after it, right? So this is kind of like my 2-year boot camp for what I'm building, right? Like business wise, putting myself out there, going through some internal transformation. It's all boot camp for the next level of my life. And so I love being able to show my clients and being able to show myself like, this is just for a time. This is just for a purpose and this is what it's doing for you. So let's just bring some awareness and gratitude towards the suck right now. But just keep going because it's not going to be like this forever. I think sometimes we have a tendency to think that, because things are bad, they might stay bad, or what did we do to cause the bad? And when you learn more about like astrology and understand that there are just times that are hard and it's for you, right? I was looking at Vanessa Williams' chart the other day and she's got this beautiful setup to she had this really positive period where it brought her, she was like a beauty queen and she even won Miss America, and it was like a really positive. And then she had this time period where there was a lot of squaring on the hardest planet in her chart. And all of a sudden there was these nude photos that came out and she actually had to denounce her crown as Miss America. And it was a really hard time in her life. And then that period ended and she went into her most powerful period. It's like a peak period. And she switched management and she started her singing career and acting and all of those things. And it was like so clear looking at the kind of the book of her. But I'm sure at the time she was like, what is going on? I'm never going to get out of this. But we can look back and kind of see the purpose, right? I mean, maybe she would have never had that singing career if she didn't have to go through that kind of pain with the pageantry and all of that. So I always feel like everything is for us, that we do have a plan, whether you talk about God's plan or the universe or source or any of that. It does seem very planned out. And I believe in my belief system that we were aware of the plan before we decided to kind of incarnate and move through this plan. So I love to bring the awareness to the journey, right? Where are we at right now? A lot of people come for a reading when they're uncomfortable, right? When things aren't going their way. So let's embrace it. Let's see how long we're looking at. Let's see what we can do to mitigate it a little bit. With Saturn, sometimes you just have to get a little bit more disciplined, right? And so it's like, ooh, is this just a time for discipline, or is this a time to just kind of hang on? Just kind of going through that with somebody is always really helpful. So human design, when I look at human design, it's kind of part science, part spirituality, right? So Ra in the 90s had published about these neutrinos, which are these tiny, tiny little particles that emanate through the atmosphere and actually go through the cells of our body. They go through, they're such tiny little particles. And he had talked about that. And then in 2015, the science actually caught up to that and talks about these neutrinos. So it's interesting that he was able to kind of detect this before science did. The spiritual practice in this is it uses kind of astrology. It uses the chakra system, the Kabbalah tree of life, and the Chinese I Ching. So we're bringing all of these different modalities into one space. And if you pull your human design chart and look at it, to me, it always looks like a circuit board. And actually, men love the human design more than like astrology. If I'm giving a reading, the men can usually kind of track with human design. And once I get into astrology, they're kind of like starting to fade most of the time. Because human design is such a mechanical, it's like kind of like a user manual, like a user manual for your body, for your mind, for like how do you interact in the world. And so it's super helpful. Human design brings me a lot of information about your energy type and how to utilize your energy in a more efficient way. Human design talks about like how do we interact with others or attract others. We also are looking at like what centers you're kind of sending out a signal or what centers you're receiving a signal. And so a lot of times when we have a lot of open centers where we're receiving a lot of the world's signals, other people's signals, we can kind of take that on as our own. And so putting awareness in that and understanding that's not ours, that's somebody else's, is super helpful. And then kind of tapping into your own voice and your own mechanics. Human design gives us our authority, right? So that was one of the biggest things that changed my life is I'm an emotional authority, which is an emotional wave. So anybody with an emotional authority, it takes time to make a decision. You have this wave that kind of gets excited and it can see all the good, and then it kind of falls and it can see kind of all the bad. It's more of the low part of the wave. And then it will always come to kind of a calm, right? And so if you learn your wave and you can kind of interact with the high and the low, you have so much more information to make a decision, but you have to give yourself that time and understand it, right? Because you would see people that could just make a split decision. Everybody in my house has a sacral authority, which is a yes, no in the moment. But me, I have an emotional. So it takes me just a little bit more time to get clarity. And then it's never like, yes, this is what I'm going to do. It's still always, I'm 80% certain that I'm going to move forward with this. My emotional state is pretty good. I'm going to move forward. And then I get to see whether it's one of those learning situations or one of those really positive outcomes. But as long as I give myself the clarity, it usually it feels very aligned for me, right? Other than when I would just get excited and like sign up for something or buy something and then immediately regret it afterwards. So so knowing your authority and maybe how your body gives you signals. The splenic is like really quiet. So figuring out how you can listen into that like quiet whisper And then my best friend has more like of a she's a reflector, and so she's more tied to the moons, but the reflector loves to kind of speak out what they're thinking and have it somebody reflect it back to them. So understanding that has been really helpful for her to realize that she needs to like journal or give it to, she'll either text me or call me and tell me what's going on, and then that kind of reflects it. It helps her process things a little bit better. So understanding like how you process, how your mind processes, how your inner authority, how your body gives you your directional sense, right? Is really human design, and you can dive really deep. I love looking at the diet side of human design as well. It really taught me that I'm not very good at fasting. I would try all the time. I would try to intermittent fast. I would try to fast, and I would always get like this shaky blood sugary type issue. But it's because my mind is constantly on. Like from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, I am very much pulling the world in, very focused. And if I don't have nutrition kind of coming in, at some point my brain will just be like, I don't have the fuel, right? And so understanding that was really helpful for me as well. And some people have a little bit more, they can eat or not eat. They can eat a lot at one time, or maybe go without, do that intermittent fasting thing. So those are some of my favorite things about human design, like why I think it's important. Moving into astrology, my newest love and obsession. I never was really that into astrology because I just knew my sun sign, and I'm a Gemini. And in astrology, that always seemed to be like some sort of super chatty person that talked to anybody, and maybe like to talk about frivolous things and things like that. And that was not me at all. So until I understood the moon and Saturn and Pluto conjunct my moon, and where my sun was actually in Gemini at those last degrees, making it a little bit more slow to share. If I'm really excited about something, I will talk, but if I'm not, I won't. I won't say a word. And my sister's a very early Gemini, and she will talk no matter what. She'll say everything she's thinking without even thinking, right? It just comes right out of her. And so it just made so much more sense to me when I started understanding the individualization of, aspects and the degree and the house. The houses in astrology are so important, right? Understanding all of that gave me so much more, and then just made me want more, right? It made me want to learn more. I'd had some astrology readings in the past, and it was always just somebody kind of blurting out all of these qualities I had, and it never really landed me anywhere. And so when I started studying astrology for myself and realizing, some of the timing techniques and the aspects and where these planets are, and how to start to use them to my advantage, and maybe even understand some of the hard things, right? Every chart has the hardest planet in it, right? So if it's a day chart, that's Mars. And if it's a night chart, that's Saturn. And I have Mars conjunct my sun, right? In the 11th house, and the 11th house is friendships. And so when I first started learning astrology, it was like, oh, you're supposed to be in groups. Your friends are supposed to bring you all these things. You're supposed to make all these friends. And that's something that I've always had a hard time with, right? Like, I couldn't understand it. My cousins were always my best friends. My sisters were always my best friends. And that's very third house. And my third house has really nice aspects. So it never was a problem, but friendships, it was always like a hard thing for me. I would have this really best friend that felt like a sister to me, and then they would move, or something it would just happen over and over and over. and I would have to make another friend, and it was always this uncomfortable thing. And when I even when I moved to I was in the military and I found my best friend, we met right before I left. It was like, "Oh, we just became best friends. Oh, now I'm moving." But it was one of those friendships that were really meant for me, and so we've continued to stay in touch. And so I can see where having Mars in this placement has kind of, and this is outside of my control, right? There's nothing I can do about it. It's like Mars will kind of break things up over and over and over again for me, or make groups difficult or things like that. And so I always was like, what is wrong with me? I don't understand it. And until I started to understand this placement, and I could stop kind of being hard on myself, that there's nothing wrong with me. And actually, being so mutable, having so much like Gemini, and I have a lot of Sagittarius and all of that, can lead me to, I have that Neptune placement can lead me to really take people on a lot, right? Like feel so empathetic, and to really connect deeply with people, almost to the point where I put their needs ahead of mine, and I start to take on their problems instead of worrying about mine. And so that Mars is kind of protecting me a little bit, right? It's a struggle in a lot of ways, but it's also a protection, right? It was there for a reason. It's only making those friendships that are really meant for me, and kind of pushing out the rest. So I'm kind of grateful for it now, and it just answered a lot of questions for me, and helped me to understand, and I'm really grateful for the really good friends that I do have. They do start to feel super super close and super meant for me, right? Not just having lots and lots of acquaintances, and people that aren't really really tied to what's for my purpose, and helping me. So that's a little bit about why understanding your astrology in a deeper way, like more individually, instead of just seeing your sun sign. Or, I mean, I think that even just learning your sun sign and your moon and your ascendant are important. I have a video on the big three, and I think they're important, but getting it even to the next level of individualization. And that's what I do in my readings. I don't ever just kind of blabber on about, oh, this, and this in your chart. I try to really connect you with where are the struggles, where are the good things, and how do we use them. And like I said, I'm really starting to step into some of the Hellenistic astrology that used Time Lord and the zodiacal releasing and things like that. They give us a lot more understanding if we want to look back and understand the past a lot more, or if we want to look forward and understand the energies that are coming, right? I see more and more this being something, let's check in quarterly, let's check in yearly, and make sure we're utilizing the energies that we have. And that's why I also offer coaching, especially if you're going through a big transition like retirement, or you're switching careers, or want to switch careers, or want to start something, understanding the energy of kind of where you have the most, uh, what would it be, the most momentum is super helpful, I think. And then gene keys is another modality that I love. I kind of just weave it in because Richard Rudd studied under the founder of Human Design and he actually taught Human Design for a long time, but then he asked if he could create his own system. And he really found a beautiful way to take the 64 gates in Human Design and make them into something else. He calls them the gene keys, right? The keys. And each one he gives a shadow, a gift, and a city. And so the city is kind of enlightenment and getting to like the highest property of that, and the gift is where I'm always shooting for. It's like where, let's get out of the shadow and where this is useful and such a gift, right? And then the shadow is something, I think shadow work has come up a lot more lately, but for me, some people could just, they do the shadow work in a very like journalistic way or feeling into their body. For me, I love to have something to respond to. So I love looking at the gene keys and where my shadows are and kind of contemplating them, which is what the gene keys are meant for. So anybody can go to genekeys.com and pull their gene keys. You just put in your birth information and it kind of breaks down what's the shadow, what's the gift. And then I like to just kind of sit in them. He has 2 books that are really beautiful, or you can search online a lot for some more in-depth on this gene key. But I like to integrate it into the human design. So when I'm doing the reading, I'm always kind of looking at the shadow and the gift as well and kind of integrating it that way. And it's just such a beautiful thing. For me, my son is in the 12th gate or gene key, right? So if we're looking at human design, it's in the 12th gate. If we're looking at the gene keys, it's in the 12th key, right? And so in human design, it talked a lot about stopping, right? Knowing when to stop, or like it was all about speaking. And in gene keys, it talked about vanity versus discrimination, right? And so when I would sit and read and contemplate on this gene key, it really helped me to realize, because this one's kind of a tricky one because you can be, it's a little bit clever. So you can talk yourself out of the shadow very easily. But when you're faced with kind of reading this and seeing the shadow, I saw vanity not as like, oh, you're so vain, but this stopping myself from speaking or sharing from a place of vanity is in, if I didn't sound perfect or look perfect or perfectly put out everything that I did, I would stop myself because I didn't want to put myself out there unless it was perfect. And let's face it, it's never perfect, right? And so I get to this discrimination, and it's really beautiful at seeing other people, if they're being authentic and feeling into whether they're really living what they're speaking. But it also helps me when I get to that level to know that what I've learned is valuable and that I'm using it in the correct way. Then it doesn't matter how I put it out there or how it looks, as long as I'm doing it from kind of the correct place. And so that was like a big aha for me when I learned about that gene key. And so that's something that I just continue to work with. I go back through all of the gene keys. There's 4 outer, and then you can move through the inner. And I just read them and kind of contemplate, like, where am I in the shadow? Where am I in the gift? What could I do to step more into the shadow or gift? And it just kind of checks you a little bit. And I just think that's beautiful. But I love to kind of integrate that into the readings as well, because I just see so much beauty. And as I always am looking for like the why, right? It gives me why I do things that I do. Am I doing it out of like a fear response or not? So I love using all of these in such a synergistic way. They all kind of help each other. And so that's why I love all of these tools. Some people just go really deep in one. And I think there's beauty, right? That's actually kind of how I've gained the experience I have, right? Because I'm standing on the shoulders of people that have dug really deep into one, right? They put their blinders on, they dug really deep, and they learned all of these things. And then I'm able to extract what I think is most necessary. And so that's been really helpful. But as a manifesting generator in human design, I want to get there quickly, right? I want to get my clients to where they want to be as quickly as possible. And so I'm trying to find all of the tools and what's most useful and kind of cutting down time, right? And that's just something that the manifesting generator is really good at. So those are my 3 favorites with some stories of kind of how I came across and why I use them. If you want to kind of do a deep dive, I love doing the one-off reading. If you just kind of want to dip your toe, I have some great options. There's one that's like an hour and a half, and that's going to be human design, gene keys, and astrology all kind of tied in. Or you can just go straight to astrology. I have some hour-long readings there. If you want to do some coaching, you know that you have like a big change, you can book a free consultation, or you can email me. I just prefer to have a conversation of what you are looking for so we can build you exactly what you need. So yeah, check out that. Check out all of my Instagram is just evolving dot on dot purpose. Um, Facebook, I have an evolving on purpose Facebook account. I'm on TikTok and evolving on purpose. And my website to book is evolvingonpurpose.org, O-R-G. Somebody wrote a book and took my evolvingonpurpose.com and don't even use it, but that's okay. So yeah, evolvingonpurpose.org is the place to book with me. But yeah, it was wonderful getting to share all of the reasons that I love these systems, and I hope you will dig in and look at them a little bit more.